individual and customized point shoe fitting is so much more important than people understand. So a correct fit for you actually may look very different than a correct shoe for someone else. Meaning that if you are a certain dancer with certain range of motion in your feet and your ankles and with a certain body type, with different types of laxity and different compression and all of that, those all make a difference on how your shoe fits. So it's not as simple as like a size 7 women's. It's, the vamp and the wings and the length. All of those make a really big difference. The number one thing to look out for, I would say, with point shoe fitting is pain. Actually, pain is a very good indication of how the shoe fits. If something hurts really badly, then there's probably something wrong with the shoe. And a lot of people really thought differently. A couple decades ago, they always told you, like, it's point shoes, it's supposed to hurt. But it really shouldn't actually be that way. If there's something hurting you, not only is the shoe incorrect, it's probably doing more damage than you think. It's not just about having a blister or a bruised toenail. It could have like long-term problems. Point shoes are basically made out of two different parts. It's the box and the shank. The shank is the backbone of the shoe, which helps support the bottom of your foot. And the box is the part where it encapsulates your toes. So the box is going to have three different parts. The vamp, which is the front of the toes, the wings, which is sides, and then also the platform, which is where you balance. So we can break down the parts of the shoe even further. We can talk about the waist seam, which is the sides of the shoe, where the seam is, the back seam, where the back of your heel is, and then the throat of the shoe, which is where the drawstring comes out of. And every little part of the shoe, and depending on the material that the shoes are made out of and how the shoes are created, it will do something different on your feet. And that's so fascinating to me. No matter how long I've been in this industry, I love like new technologies, even though really point shoe making has not changed that much over the past, many, many decades. Just even something slightly different, like different materials in the glue, or if the shoe was made inside out rather than outside in, those all make a difference on how your foot responds to the shoe. For Freed, which is as traditional as it gets, it's made out of different materials. So burlap, could have cardboard. It's mostly natural materials and natural fibers. And between all of these layers, there is a proprietary glue. So that's like where you get that lovely crunch when you bend the shank. And it's because of those layers, you're able to get over on your point shoes and get enough support, but it also molds to your foot at the same time and gives you support. So those layers and that glue is very, very specific. With other companies, they may use different materials and they may use more or less layers. So for example, the new Block Flexus that came out, they have 6 layers of material in the box, but you can also customize that with, less layers. If you want something that's lighter, if you want something that moves a little bit more, then like you can take some of those layers out. So it's mostly natural materials. The Nikolai or Grishko founder, he always jokes about how you can eat his point shoes because it's all natural and natural materials. So basically, those are what traditional shoes are made out of. Newer materials and newer innovation, they may use polymer, they may use more synthetic materials. From a big picture standpoint, point shoes really hasn't changed that much. But if you're looking at the context of the rest of the society, but within our small world, within the ballet and point industries, it has changed quite a bit in terms of what the shoe is made out of, like the type of shapes that they have, the type of materials that they use, the type of glue that they use is going to be changing quite a bit. It has changed quite a bit. So even looking at point shoes from like a few decades ago, the shoes are mostly made out of it was made kind of like a barrel, and the shoes are a little bit narrower and a little bit rounder. Now the shoes are a little bit wider and a little bit flatter, which is closer to like the modern foot. So things like that change. And honestly, most people will not be able to tell the difference between what was and what is now. But to us, it's a huge difference. And every year there are new pointe shoes that are being introduced and new technologies like the stretch satin just came out. There's certain glue that lasts longer, that are quieter. There are certain glue that will last longer. There are different materials like polymers being used in pointe shoes. Now there are 3D printable pointe shoes that are coming into the market. So there are lots of different things that are happening, but from the outside perspective, it really looks the same. So first of all, a dead shoe looks different for every person. So when somebody takes your pointe shoe and then feels how the shoe feels and tells you that they're dead or not, that's not possible because for every dancer, it feels different. A dead shoe to one dancer may be perfectly fine to another and vice versa. So it's basically when the shoe is not able to give you the support that you need in order for you to execute the moves that you need to do. So for example, are you able to go from flat to releve the same way that you were able to when the shoes were new? Are you suddenly feeling something painful in your shoes? Are you sliding down? Are the wings in the box broken down so that it's no longer supporting your foot anymore and you're sliding down into the shoe? Are you falling forward or backwards? When you're up on point, do you feel like all of that pressure is on the metatarsals because the shank and the box is breaking too low? So everyone's shoes kind of die a different way. Even between your left and your right, your shoes are going to die differently, but it's basically when it doesn't give you support somewhere in your feet. For longevity purposes, there are hardening agents like jet glue or shellac, or there are other methods that you can make the shoe last longer. Most of these methods are not very effective once the shoes are already dying. So once it's dead, it's kind of just dead. And maybe you may be able to get another class or so after, but it's pretty much gone. So the best method is to take one or two classes, or if you like your shoes at the very beginning, jet glue when the shoes are brand new or after a couple classes, and then just add a little bit more at a time as the shoe starts to die to make the shoe last longer. And also, if you're wearing a traditional shoe, your shoes will break down with sweat. So if you sweat a lot in your feet, even if you're standing flat inside your shoes, that means your shoes are dying. So make sure that you're either rotating your shoes to make sure that your shoes are drying out completely, because your pointe shoes typically take 36 hours to dry, or you want to have like a little fan, like the nail salon little fans that you see. You can have that with your pointe shoes to make sure that it dries out in between classes. It really just depends on what the goals are. So you have to go in with a very specific goal. Like, for example, if you're a dancer that's going on point for the first time, then let's say that your goals are to get over on your pointe shoes. Make sure that your alignment is proper from your toes to the ankles to your knees to your hips, right? So that's a big goal. Second goal may be that they're able to roll through and articulate really well for their first pair of pointe shoes to make sure that you're strengthening those intrinsic muscles. So going in without a clear goal is a mistake because depending on your goal, you may be fitted differently. So for example, if I knew that these were your first pair and we just are going to be at the bar, we're going to be strengthening your feet, then like that's going to be a very different shoe than if we're going to a competition or an audition and these shoes just need to look really good and be really quiet. Same thing with professional dancers even. Depending on what variation or what type of dance that they're doing, they may be fitted in a different shoe. So having a clear goal is paramount in pointe shoe fitting. It's not just like right or wrong. It's like what is the context around where you are using your pointe shoes. So in order to combat that, a lot of people will come in with a solution, not a problem. Meaning a solution is a shorter vamp, longer wings, harder shank. These are all solutions to a problem. A problem is I'm not getting over my box. My toenails are bruising. I'm sinking inside my shoes. These are all problems because there are multiple solutions for a singular problem. So going in with the problem will help the fitter help solve these problems a lot easier than going in with the solution because we don't know what we're fixing. And oftentimes you look very different in a pointe shoe fitting than you do in class. For us, we do check range of motion because we need to make sure that the dancer is getting over, and not just range of motion in your ankles, but also on your arch and your feet. We take a look at how compressive your feet are. Most people will change about 5% in terms of sizing during weight bearing as opposed to non-weight bearing. However, there are people that change a lot more, and that makes a really big difference on the sizing of the shoes. We also take a look at the dancer's strength to make sure that the dancer is able to rise up to pointe. If they need a little bit more help, we need to give them something that has a little bit more strength so that we can help them get over on their pointe shoes. And then we also need to make a quick assessment between strengthening and safety. So the more support you give a dancer, the more safe they will be, but the less they will strengthen. So we have to figure out like where the balance is between strengthening and stability to make sure that the dancer is challenged enough in order for them to continue to get better, but also keeping them safe enough so that they're not injured. First of all, great choice if that's you, because it's the best job in the world. I love being on this side of the ballet. I think that there are two different ways to learn, and you need both. One is pointe shoe fitting theory. So you need to understand how each part of the shoe works with a dancer's foot and the anatomy of the foot and what the dancer does, the technique of everything. And the second part is practice. So just like any medical field or any kind of skill, you need both. And for our pointe shoe fitters, we typically have them go through all of the theory of pointe shoe fitting first. And the practice of pointe shoe fitting, they need at least 100 hours of pointe fitting experience in order for them to just go off on their own. So I would say that 100 hours is it 100 hours? It might be 1,000. I need to look at our curriculum, but you need a minimum amount for you to even be able to understand how pointe shoe fitting works, because you can understand theory, and I use a lot of pointe shoe fitting theory in virtual fittings, but pointe shoe fitting theory is actually very conservative. And I usually fit the way that would work for 90% of the population or 90% of that type of scenario. But practice is slightly different in that sometimes even if it doesn't fit into the theory, it still works in some other way. So practice is also very, very important. I think the relationship is the most rewarding. I unfortunately, my first 10 years in business, I was able to follow some of my dancers all the way from when they got fitted for their first pair of pointe shoes all the way to when they became professional or when they went to college. Now I don't have that as much. I have that kind of relationship with the professional dancers now, but having your own dancers and taking responsibility and the pride that you have in watching them develop and then being part of that story and the journey, no matter how small that is the most rewarding. Absolutely.